One. Welcome everybody to the Troubadour podcast, and I have Luc Travers back on, and I'm really excited to talk to you. You're one of the few people who've come back. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm so excited to have people, maybe it's telling me I've been doing this podcast for years, haven't had too many guests come back. Now people are starting to come back. I'm like, yes, maybe things are going great, and we're going to talk about art, and we're going to talk about something very special about art that Luc has going on. But Luc, how you doing in all this craziness these days?
Well, I'm doing as well as I can. It's good in the spring. It's nice and sunny outside right now. Go out for a nice run. So yeah, doing pretty well. How about yourself, Kirk?
Yeah, the running thing, man, I can't get my head around it. I'm a weightlifter. I mean, I've been a weightlifter for 10 years, and that's all been gone. All my clothes are actually, everyone's talking about getting fatter, and all my clothes are bigger on me now because I was training for an amateur strongman competition, like legitimately. And I was getting big. And I was like, and now all my muscles are atrophied. It's like, and I hate to run. I just always have hated. I do cardio, but I hate running. And it's like, that's all there is available. So that's been tough. I have been writing a lot. So I've been doing a lot more writing than normal, which I enjoy.
I thought you meant like riding, like motorcycle riding.
I have done a little bit of riding, motorcycle riding, which is interesting because in the Bay Area, you could just like ride around and there's no one on the freeway.
Oh, like that.
Which is like, all right, I got this whole thing. I'm going the wrong way on the freeway. Why not? Don't do that. I'm kidding. It's still dangerous. But yeah, so it's been a ride for sure. And you have a rule. I'm going to pop this on the screen. From Touching the Art. So you can go to touchingtheart.com, bonding with great artists. So that is an interesting take on things. It's not just the artwork, but the artist, which, I don't know if we think about that as much. If we enjoy, a Martin Scorsese movie, do we really think about, well, what's that guy like, right? What's he up to these days and how's he doing? Right. And now, maybe I'm misrepresenting your bonding with great artists, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is and clarify that for me?
Absolutely. So it'd be fun to talk to Martin Scorsese, maybe.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to talk to him. I don't mean to downplay as a film person for sure.
No, but I remember you did a podcast on what's that recent movie?
The Irishman.
The Irishman. Yeah. And, here's the question that I would ask Martin Scorsese. When have you been like this character in The Irishman? Do you see yourself like that? Are you afraid of the moral choices you've made in your life and how they'll catch up with you in the end?
That's a good question.
So, and that's the essential question that I want to ask artists. I want to know how the artwork that they created is a reflection of a moment in their lives. Just as when I'm looking at it, I'm seeing the story and experiencing, I think of it as a reflection of my life. So to give you a little bit of background as to how this idea came about, I did study art history, but I've kind of moved away all my career away from art history because I wanted to focus on the art and not the history aspect of things.
Yeah.
But I've started to become more and more interested in a particular angle of art history. And it really solidified with me with this. I'll tell a little story. May I tell a quick little story here?
Of course. Yeah.
So it solidified with me when I interviewed about 150 artists. So here's
you
how it came
interviewed
about.
150 artists or
100 artists.
Oh, okay.
150 artists in the course of 24 hours or something like that. Yeah, this was a part of an exhibition that the museum at which I work, the Cameron Art Museum in Wilmington, is an exhibition that invited artists from the community and from all of North Carolina to submit one artwork. And it could be anybody. Anybody could come during a 48-hour period, show up, and there's a line out the door of people with all their artworks and submit artwork, and it'd be accepted without question and go on display. And what ends up happening is you have 700 artworks, salon style, all over. And part of what we did was we did video interviews, like a short minute to 2-minute video interview of the artists about their artwork. And part of my job was to be behind the camera and to ask the questions, to have this little chat with them. And over the course of time, what really became clear during those dozens and dozens of quick interviews was how much these artists cared about this art that they did. Yeah, Kirk, I've got to admit, I'm not an artist myself. I have sometimes, occasionally, I dabble into things. And I know you write, so you probably know how much of yourself goes into what you write. So, but it was for me a clear idea of seeing the artwork and then this artist and hearing what they had to say and how much it meant to them and what it reflected about them. And I started asking myself, what if I could do this with Monet or Van Gogh or William Bouguereau or Goya or Caspar David Friedrich or all these artists that I really like? And I started seeing art history a little bit differently. I started seeing art history not as a study of history, but as a recreation of a conversation you would have with an artist. Because if you do contemporary art history, what the main thing you want to do is go and talk to that artist, like I was doing, having these interviews with the artists. And what you do as an art historian is you try as best as possible to ask questions and have the artists themselves answer them. So that's why Van Gogh is very popular, because he wrote lots and lots of letters. And so you can see his thoughts about all kinds of things. And when you have an artist that's more obscure, say like Vermeer, where you don't have much, well, then forensic art historians go in and they try to repiece together from contemporary accounts, from sales, from just general art history things going on in his town. They try to piece together what he could have been thinking. They try to repiece together that kind of interview that you would have. So,
yeah, I mean,
what?
Oh,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like on YouTube, really popular are interviews and conversations with the directors, right? And I've been watching a whole bunch of those lately, of Quentin Tarantino, of Vince Gilligan, of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, all these creators. And it is interesting to see them talk about the catalyst for their art, the inspiration for it, why they did it the way they did. And in the case of movies, often how they operated under collaboration and the benefits of it for them and things of that nature. So, and they get sometimes millions of views of people who are not necessarily artists, but they are interested in the life, or at least the way that the artist approaches their work and what they were thinking when they created something that you love.
Great. And that's a lot of art history is, okay, let's try to recreate what the artist would say about what he's done and why he's done it.
Like George R. Martin has hundreds of interviews on YouTube. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a great analogy. And then here's what I would add to what I am particularly distinctly interested in.
Okay.
The thing is, what I'm interested in is the same thing that I am primarily interested in when I experience the artwork. I want to experience that artwork, but then I want to see, okay, how can I personally connect to the characters in this scene, and what can they show me about my life? Like what we did with the last talk that we had, Kirk. And so I want to ask the artist the same question. How does this artwork personally connect to your life? And the same way that we bonded over artworks last time and we shared stories and that kind of connected to the theme of that artwork, I want to do the same with that artist. I want to ask Van Gogh, all right, Van Gogh, you're looking at this scene right here of this family of peasants having potatoes that are steaming hot. That makes me think of a time when we didn't have much in my family, but we enjoyed these, these chicken pot pies. I love those chicken pot pies, Stouffer's chicken pot pies. And I would, I'd ask Van Gogh. So Van Gogh, what were your Stouffer chicken pot pies? Or what was a time when you had this family bond where you made the most of the little that you had? And that's the story that I want to hear from Van Gogh. And then at this point, what I feel like would happen is I would have a connection to Van Gogh through his artwork. We would have a shared experience. And that kind of shared experience is something that's powerful, that for you and me, Kirk, when we look and we come up with personal connections to our artwork that we're sharing, and we say, oh yeah, you've been through that moment, we're empathizing. So in a way, the kind of bonding that I want to do with great artists is to empathize with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so looking at your so that's interesting, and looking at your schedule, So this is a course you're doing.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. That's starting on April 16th. Or no, sorry. The early bird discount ends on April 16th. Sorry. And so it looks like you have, what is it? 8 weeks of discussion. So you have Norman Rockwell, you have a couple to be determined, and some Rembrandts, but you're going to go through Vermeer and Caspar David Friedrich and Francisco Goya, great romantic and poet and artist. And so that's interesting. So your approach is going to be similar to what you normally do. You're going to add an auto or a biographical element with the purpose of getting into how they approached and bonded with their own art in order for the audience to maybe gain another level of understanding of the art that they love or will come to love if they're not familiar with it. With the artist, for instance, if they're not very familiar with Goya, they can see his art. And I do think that's a great, I like to read biographies. Mm-hmm. I've read a biography of just not too long ago of William Wordsworth, and I did find it very penetrating as well as engaging in and adding something to the poetry itself. When I went back to read something like the Lucy or the Matthew poems, and I prefer the Matthew poems if you're familiar with any of those, like the like 2 April Mornings and the Fountain. No, I'm not. And of course the Prelude by him, but it really helps to know. I mean, you don't need to have this information, right? Good art is isolated in the sense that all you need is the work of art.
Yeah.
But it does sometimes add something to know that he wrote the Lucy poems and the Matthew poems, which are about kind of love and loss, right? Like right on the border of something, it's kind of hopeful for something, and then this loss that you have to deal with. And he wrote these in Goslar, Germany, during one of their fiercest storms when he was trying to get back to Hamburg to his friend Coleridge, and he was isolated. He didn't speak the language. Luckily, he did have his sister with him, but he was isolated from the whole world. And he sat down because he had no other choice, and he was there for 4 months. And he wrote, and he was also broke, and he wrote 24 poems, some of the most famous poems of his career, of his early career especially. And he started the Prelude in this isolated area. And it helps to see the kind of pain that he was, experiencing. And it was all in his mind. He didn't even have access to books, and he loved books. So he only could, go into his mind and think. Now I wouldn't know that just by reading a Lucy poem, and I wouldn't know the kind of, difficulty he was going through when he was writing The Fountain or the 2 April Mornings, which is about looking at your past and dealing with regret that lingers for long periods of time and throughout your whole life, which is what 2 April Mornings is about, essentially. And that makes a little bit of more sense, when you know what he's going through at that time, when he's, in his early 30s, he's isolated, his projects are falling apart, and he just has nothing else to do but to write.
Yeah. And what are you going to do when you're isolated like that, except for looking at your past? And a lot of the things, I'm a big sports fan, Kirk, and there's no sports.
Yeah.
And all the ESPN, all the sports stations, I listen to sports podcasts, you know what they're doing? They're looking at the past.
Oh yeah, clips. Yeah,
they're re-showing all of Michael Jordan's big basketball games, Kobe Bryant's,
a lot of Kobe.
And so it's let's explore our past again. And I think I've seen some statistics on bookstores. Really, lots of books being sold, and not necessarily new ones, but the classics.
Yeah.
And so people are using this as an opportunity, not just to explore their personal past, maybe reflect like William Wordsworth was, but also just things that are out there in the culture that they have, that have gone by. And they can go and take a look at them now again from distant times away. So it's I'm glad you brought up that anecdote there, because I think there's a big tie-in there. Um, and one of the things I've been trying to figure out is, okay, what precisely is the value of knowing about Wordsworth and what he is going through when he wrote the poems?
Yes.
Same way, what's precisely the value of thinking about Van Gogh and his potato eaters, and then figuring out that there is a particular moment like that for Van Gogh? And that's something that's still developing. I've got a couple of ideas. And
can you share
I'll
one?
share two. Okay. I'll share two.
Okay, great.
The first one is, there's a question I get asked in my elementary, junior high literature classes very often, especially younger students. Whenever I tell a personal story, or whenever we read a book that it's not quite clear it's fiction or nonfiction, they're excited about it, they ask, did that really happen? Is that true? And there is something about seeing an artwork and thinking, oh, wow, that's pretty amazing, or that's very interesting, and then asking and having an answer to the question, is that true? And when you ask that question about an artwork, you're asking, is that true to the experience of the artist who created it?
Yeah.
And so if you ask that, and you have a story, an anecdote, a moment from the artist's life that matches, it reinforces the truth of the meaning that you're gaining from that artwork. You can see it in your life, but you also then see it, yeah, they created it because they were having that same exact moment that I was having.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's the first one. So that's the first one. I'll hold the second one for a moment.
Yeah. So, because I was going to say something about that. I like that a lot. Because I always struggle with this when communicating it to other people, because I think, to me, as somebody who has, wanted and worked toward trying to be an artist of some sort, I think it holds a special value to me, because I can learn from them in a sense, right? Like, I read a biography of Henrik Ibsen, and the famous playwright.
I love Ibsen. Yeah, I just taught Wild Duck to my high school students.
Yeah, he's amazing. And, he's basically considered the grandfather of modern theater, and how we, and he ushered in a new kind of way to approach theater. But one of the anecdotes that I'll never forget is how much time he spent watching the audience watch a play, which is something that we don't think about. But as an art, so in other words, sometimes I read these things and it's to learn what I can learn from them to be a better artist. But if you're not an artist, that's not necessarily a value to you. So I find what you're saying is really interesting, because I've also often struggled, like, how, if you're not trying to be an artist, or, it's just a hobby, but you don't want to do it full time, what value does it really happen to know about Wordsworth's life for, all these other artists that you're talking about, and all the artists you're going to be talking about? And I think, so the idea of the question people ask, did it happen, is very profound. Like, was it true? Because, going to Shakespeare, even, people are obsessed to this day with who inspired certain love poems, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with Wordsworth. Like, there has been a man or a woman hunt for the Lucy, this real life Lucy. Was there a Lucy in his past? And this has baffled, people for 200 years. They want to know. Everybody wants to know, who the hell is Lucy Gray, and they really want to know. It's the same thing. Who inspired Shakespeare? And I think I like the way you put it, because the question of, is it true, is really vital for art in general. And one of the primary, or one of the deep influences or powers that it has over human consciousness and our souls, in a sense, is this idea that, you hear that art lies to you in order to tell you a truth, right? Or it's not something that, when we think about what fiction is, it's not something that actually happened, but it's something that is an amalgamation of things that may have been observed, put in a certain order by an artist's mind in order to convey some fundamental thematic truth that will resonate more powerfully than you can get if you were to, for instance, read, it's the two, I think of those two paintings by Goya are, the hands up one and the shooting one, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That is the style is so interesting, and it's, I don't know if you have that. I probably should have. It just kind of popped in my head.
You can the 8th of May.
Yeah.
If you Google the 8th of May, or anybody out there, you Google the 8th of May Goya, you'll have that painting.
Yeah. So like, there's something about it that really resonates with me in terms of the power of that moment that he was trying to convey, that you could read all about these two incidents, the 3rd of May and I guess the 8th of May.
3rd of May. Thank you.
Yeah. The 3rd of May and the 8th of May.
And the 8th of May. So yeah, the 8th of May is the one you're talking about, I believe.
I think so, but this is the one. I'll pop this on the screen, and then I do want to talk about the ones you have brought with us, but since I mentioned this, I might as well
absolutely
show it.
And then Goya is one of the artists that I'm going to focus on in the course.
Yeah, and that's so I thought
thought
of him. Yeah, so I have this painting up now, the 3rd of May by Goya, and I think it conveys, it's I don't know a lot about the painting style in general. I think maybe it's something you can kind of convey a little bit of because it's, to me, it feels almost like not as, like, it's not a Vermeer, I guess is the word I'm trying, like, it's not the clarity, the sharpness of the characters. It's not a Vermeer, but it's the subject and what's going on. I mean, it almost feels like, in terms of the style, again, knowing very little about style in painting in particular, it feels almost like a teenager who is still on the way to mastering the art is capable of doing. Does that make sense?
I don't know if I completely agree with that, Kirk.
Then help me out
see
here.
the distinction. I can see the distinction between Goya style and Vermeer style.
Yeah.
But I think there might be some reasons, because if you take a look at other Goya paintings, oh man, there's a different kind of crispness to it. So these are less as a development of his technique, of his mastery, and more as a choice that he's making. But I'm not an expert on style, but I'm curious, why are you thinking about this one, Kirk?
Well, I was just thinking about it because of what you were talking about earlier about, and I'm trying to make the point about the reality of something versus the, like, was it true? And that question, was it true? And for some reason, these exact human beings don't exist and never exactly existed. Right.
Yeah.
There's he may not have even, I don't know if his biography might be helpful to know. He may not have even been there for this. Right. I don't know if he was there for this. And
you know what, Kirk? That I wouldn't really care that much about it. I wouldn't really care about the historical truth of this depiction. What I would care would be about the thematic truth of this depiction Goya.
Yes.
So when I'm seeing this, and this is very quick, I haven't spent much time with this artwork, but I'm looking at this anonymous group of soldiers who are shooting down or about to shoot down, who've already shot down several, and this lone figure who's raising his arms up with a desperate look, and I'm feeling for them. These are the last seconds of these poor people's lives. And I feel like I'm witnessing this scene. I feel like I'm witnessing this atrocity, this injustice. And so the thematic truth there is that situation. When have you witnessed some kind of atrocity perpetrated on others who didn't deserve it? If we can go that far. And I've never seen an execution take place, but I have seen something similar to which I can empathize. And the question I'd ask Goya isn't, Goya, were you there on the 8th or the 3rd or whatever May it was in 1808? Were you there to see this? I would not ask him that. I would ask him, Goya, when was the time that you saw some horrendous injustice being done to some poorer individuals? And that's what I want to hear about. Even if he talks about something that has nothing to do with the historical events that happened that night.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Oh, no, 100%. And I totally agree. I think you said better what I was trying to say. So, I'm just fascinated by this focus that so many of us have of asking, was it true? right? Like a lot of people say, well, it's not good because it's not true. It's, it's obviously not true. Or that couldn't happen, right? Like the believability thing, and people are always so focused on that believability, which I understand. You can't be so disconnected from reality that it's not possible at all. But the way you put it earlier, I think is very helpful too, and helpful for me in terms of the style even is like, so if it is a little disconnected from reality, so like, this isn't how people even look exactly, right? There is a difference between how people look and this painting. And, the way you put it with a choice, that it was a choice, really made me look at it closer again. And now that I see it, I'm noticing other things that make what you're saying more clear to me. Like how these gunmen are actually pretty sharply drawn. And it's the guy who's he feels a little blurry, the guy in the background. And the background seems a little, not clear as well. Like the backdrop little hill seems like it's hastily kind of put together. But the building in the background is perfectly lined and drawn out. Like it's beautiful. So I think, or like, linear and everything, it looks like a master did it. So I think looking at it as a choice is a very helpful approach too, in terms of the reality of it. Like, does it reflect reality? And sometimes when you see a clock that's like melting, and it's like folded over, like whoever that guy is, I can't remember his
name.
Dali, yeah. Thank you. That's a choice. And if you think about it that way, I think it can change your view. But anyway, I liked your point about this is, one question people ask is this real? So what was the second one? Sorry.
All right. Tangent. So yeah, I tell you what, I'm going to hold back on telling everybody what the second one is. Okay. I think I'll hold back on that because
tease us a little, huh?
Yeah, I would, Kirk. And I think it might make more sense if we follow up on this point a little bit and I share an artwork with you.
Okay, let's do that.
And Kirk, would you mind being a guinea pig? And I'll just show this artwork to you.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
And you can kind of read it so that people can hear the description and you can process it yourself. And then we'll kind of go through and talk a little bit about what's going on here, maybe personally connect to it, and then maybe ask the question, is this true?
Is it true?
For the artist.
Yeah.
All right, so
I will do that.
Here is, are you ready? Well, let me show a screen here. I'm going to share my screen with you. And that's my little song for sharing screen.
I actually have sound effects.
Oh, you do? That's great.
Yeah, I'll do.
All right. So you should see a blank screen right now, and I'm going to go to this artwork.
All right. Let me pop this up. All right, we have it. It's on screen. It's just the artwork.
So what are you seeing, Kirk?
All right, let me see. This is, I instantly liked it for whatever reason. I think because they're looking right at me, and I have a respect for people who kind of boldly just look right at you, right? And it looks like they're looking. So like the second I saw it, I had a positive feeling about it.
She is boldly looking right at you, isn't she?
What's that?
She is boldly looking at you, isn't she?
Yeah, so I appreciated that because I often see myself, I was in sales. I often have this issue when I interact with people that they don't look at me. They have a hard time looking in people's eyes, right? Yeah. That's something that you have to train to do sometimes. And I did myself. And so I instantly thought of that when I saw, like, it looks like she's looking right at my eyes. Like my eyes went right to the lady in the foreground, the lady and wearing a black dress. So just so people, if you're listening rather than watching this on YouTube or Facebook, I'm looking at an image right now, and I'll put this on troubadourbag.com of I'm gonna say two women, but I was thought maybe this could be a somewhat effeminate man in the background, but it looks like she has curls, but the curly hair, I should say. So it's two women, I'm assuming sisters at this point, because they look somewhat similar. They have, crown, like little tiaras in their head, or some kind of head tiara of some sort. They're wrapped in, the one in black is wrapped in casually in a blanket. I think that's what that is, sitting on a red velvet couch. And the woman in the sister in the back with a maybe a gray robe of some sort, is she's has her arm around the one in black, which is why my first reaction was maybe they're dating or something. But then I looked at her closely and maybe she's a girl and they still could be dating. I don't know. That's possible still. And then the woman in the black dress is looking straight at me as well. And she is holding, for both of them to read, it looks like, out in front of her. So it's not, that's not the way I would hold a piece of paper if I was reading to myself, right? Mm-hmm. It's something like someone else I want to, hey, read this with me, or let's read this together for whatever reason. That she's holding it out so, the other person could see it. Maybe how you would with a kid reading a child's book, right? Where you hold it out, they could see the pictures and the mouse went over the house, that stuff.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah. That's how I kind of.
And that even suggests a little bit more of their relationship too, because wouldn't you agree that the one in the back looks like she's younger, less mature?
Yes, I can see that. I would, it would be nice to zoom in a little bit because I'm not looking at it like a full screen like you are. It's okay. That's helpful. Yeah. So it looks like almost the one on the, in the foreground. I mean, she's just more physically developed now that I see her closer. Yeah. So she has a bosom and the other one doesn't. So she's probably a prepubescent girl or around that young age. Is that a good assessment?
Sure.
Okay. And, but I don't see her as her mother. I don't see her as mother, daughter at this point. Yeah. Cause she doesn't seem quite old enough. I'm still saying younger sister, older sister at this point.
Yeah.
And it's cool that you can actually see the lettering on this piece of paper. So they're not looking at a mathematical equation. They're looking at probably some kind of text, although I guess you can't really make out words. It's just scribbling like you might see in a cartoon, right? Where they scribble it. But to me, again, the most interesting thing is that they're not looking at the letter right now. So it's almost like they got interrupted by somebody right before this took place. Like me, it feels like I interrupted them. Like that's I was like, oh, sorry. I didn't know you guys were reading together. I'm going to walk away slowly. Like that's the feeling. Like,
and that's funny that's your emotional reaction. I'm going to walk away slowly because I like that immediate reaction you had and the word you used, her boldness. If I can try to sit like she does and have my back erect, and even when you hold your arm out like that, it's a powerful arm gesture to hold like that. And then she twists her head to look at you, and her chin is lifted, and that stare is direct in your eyes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, the stare, like I said, is a big. When you ask, like, where do your eyes go first? That's where my eyes definitely go first.
So, I mean, just based on what you're seeing about the body language and the relationship between the two and their expressions, could you make a stab at a guess at what kind of letter this is?
Man,
you just won the lottery?
No. I have one in my mind. I'm kind of trepidatious in terms of how wrong I could be.
Go for it. Reason. That's the part of reading artwork. You throw out hypotheses and then you look at
good point. Okay. So I think they just got a letter from a parent that one of them has possibly died.
Oh man.
And I'm, or a letter that, indicating that a parent died. That's what I'm getting from the younger one kind of holding on to the older one. That's something that you would do when you're feeling a strong emotion. Like you're trying to hold on, right? And
look at the way that her hand is tightly wrapped around her sister's waist. Yeah.
That's, I think it's not like just a casual, I'm relaxed, having my arm around her, as sisters might, just kind of like my arm is more comfortable here. It's more like she's her anchor in the world right now.
Yeah.
Now they don't look like they're wailing and screaming. I imagine these are maybe British women, not, ancient Greeks where they hired wailers pulling out their hair, so I that's what makes me wonder, like, if they did get something that tragic, Because it may just be like a casual, daddy's not coming home for Christmas type thing, right? And so he's gonna or he's gonna go off to war or something, which is another kind. So all I know is they got some kind of news. It's important to them, but it's it's affecting them, and I think there's some kind of distress.
You're a wonderful art reading partner. You know that, Kirk?
Thank you.
So I think that, well, let me just dive in and tell you a little bit, because I know we don't have too much time. So a little bit of the background story of these characters here. This is actually a double portrait. And they are two sisters, and they're two sisters whose father is named Joseph Bonaparte.
Okay.
And Joseph Bonaparte was the brother to Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yep.
And this double portrait of these two sisters, of these two nieces of Napoleon Bonaparte, was done, I think, 1821, 22. And I don't know if you remember your history, Kirk, but do you remember when Napoleon was exiled at Waterloo and all that?
I don't know the exact dates, but I do know it's around this time. I know it's early 1800s.
Early 1800s. And I'll the specificity will be helpful here. It's 1815 that Napoleon is exiled after he loses at Waterloo. The second time.
Okay, the second time. Okay, that makes sense. Time.
So Napoleon's exiled. This is 7 years after his being exiled. Of course, Napoleon's brother is exiled too. His brother is exiled to the United States, of all places.
Oh, okay. I think I heard that.
And Joseph de Bonaparte's two daughters are in exile too, but not in the United States, in Belgium. And your guess was a pretty good guess. That letter is a letter from their father. It's just, as far as I know, some random letter from their father. But think of them. You said prepubescent, very young.
Yeah.
It's like the one is a little bit older. One's not married yet. I'm assuming, we see a ring finger with no ring. And so they are there without family, without their father, receiving a letter from far away where their father is, isolated together. And that letter shouldn't be just the letter from their father. That should be their father there with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's no other there's no mother in the picture either. So it's definitely two young girls receiving this. Going back to your bonding with the artist.
Yeah.
Is the artist a Bonaparte? Is he one of the family, or is he an outsider?
That's a pretty good guess there. The artist, and I'm going to show here another image of the artist and his wife. The artist is named Jacques-Louis David.
Oh, okay. Well, I've heard of him.
You've heard of Jacques-Louis David, right?
Yeah.
He did Socrates and Oath of Horatii, and I know what, I might show a few of those in a moment.
Sure.
But Jacques-Louis David was a Bonapartist.
Yep.
And when Bonaparte fell, he went into exile in Belgium.
Okay. That makes sense. So he
now, but you know what? I want you to forget about that, Kirk. Forget about that. Because that's not the main question to ask right now. The main question to ask is, when have you been in a similar situation as these two girls have?
Besides right now?
You got it. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah, banished away from all the things that I love in isolation.
And doing voice calls or Zoom calls with family members that you wish were there with you.
Yeah. And you're cut off from everything. Yeah. I mean, you're cut off from the life that you had been building type thing. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I totally, that makes a lot of sense. So that's something I definitely can sympathize with in their plight.
And then if you wanted to, you could go even further and ask yourself, okay, there's one figure who's stronger and the younger sister is holding on to that strength. And if who would you want to be? If you're the younger sister, who would you want to be that person that's the older sister? Who would you want to be there with you? Your quarantine partner that you would see as strong and you would gain strength from if they were there with you. And then who would be the person for you in that letter that you're receiving that letter from that you wish were there?
Yeah.
So part of the motivation of this course isn't just bonding with great artists, but the subtitle has to do with looking at artists and how they respond to upheaval, especially social upheaval in their lives.
Yeah.
The kind of upheaval that we are experiencing in our lives, all kinds of different facets of that upheaval. And here's one facet, the distance you have from those that you love that you can't be with.
Yeah.
So
just like the Gogh
when you're
one,
able
to
right. To some extent, right? It's a little bit similar, kind of similar to that. Yeah. Though that Gogh one is pretty tragic. So when you're able to connect to this artwork personally, you can say, oh yeah, I know this kind of moment.
Yeah.
And then you could ask, okay, did Jacques-Louis David, when he painted this, what would have been a moment for him that's like that? And that's the kind of research that I'm interested in art history. What is Jacques-Louis David's moment like this? And Jacques-Louis David probably had many moments like this.
Yeah. Someone who's exiled.
He himself exiled.
Yeah.
He would have sympathized with the daughters. Yes, I know. He left his career. He left his friends. He left his family.
Oh, wow.
And his wife went with him to Brussels.
Yeah.
So his whole life was back in Paris. 65 years he'd been there.
Wow. I didn't know that about him. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a history of great artists who had that happen to them. And there's definitely something about the social upheavals. Now, here's a question about all of this. So this painting that you showed is a much more intimate scene. To some degree, I think it's interesting because the girls probably do have a more relatable experience to what we're experiencing with coronavirus 2020 versus what their father went through, right? Like their father went through this intense upheaval that is going to be maybe harder for us to relate to, like the feeling that he might go through, right? Because he's going to go through grander emotional experiences because he has a grander emotional life to some degree. So what do you think about, do you always have, like the Gogh one, for instance, that, you made the question of when have you ever seen an injustice like this? The injustices that you saw were probably not even near the injustices that they saw, that Gogh might have seen. For some reason popping in my head is the Tennyson Charge of the Light Brigade, where he read a story of the Charge of the Light Brigade that went down in that valley of the death. And, there's not the reason why, and, there's but to do and die. And he has this whole, experience of that. That's something that we can sympathize and relate to on one level. And then you can maybe understand what he went through, what Tennyson might have gone through, or what Gogh might have gone through in seeing injustices. But does it take away that we can't get to that level of experiencing it? Does that make sense at all?
Kirk, I think I understand what you're asking. And I'm going to say, absolutely, I can get to that level.
Okay. Yeah, please.
And this way. So you're what I think, let me make sure that you're asking it correctly. So You're saying, Luke, isn't that just too intense a moment? There are people that are being executed there, and you've not gone through that kind of moment. And I would say I have not been there personally, but I can make some connections that have qualitatively the same kind of emotional response. As you were talking, there was just something that popped in my mind that I saw yesterday in the news.
Okay.
And so this is getting in a little bit of political territory, a little bit controversial maybe.
Personally, I'm fine with that.
So I remember seeing, and I don't want to deviate the conversation to something political, but so this is just my personal response to something that I would relate to that Gogh scene.
Yeah.
Here in North Carolina, there was, and I don't know the full background. I have not investigated the story, but there were some kind of protests in Raleigh, and then protesters were arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And they were arrested by executive order because there were no protests allowed.
No people over 50 or whatever in it. Yeah.
Or even, I don't know exactly what it was, but they were arresting protesters.
Yeah.
And these are protesters that, that would normally and every other time be able to go up and say, we want to do this, we want to do this. And they were arrested.
Yeah.
And my emotional response to that would be the same kind of emotional response that I would have to the similar situation that's going on in the Goya. I'm seeing this injustice being done to innocent people.
And by seeing the Goya painting, it makes you see the protesters being arrested as more tragic than you would have otherwise if you hadn't seen the Goya painting. Is that true? Like it kind of imbues the protester experience with a deeper sense of the injustice than, oh, that's an unfortunate event. Obviously it's not on the same level, but the emotions track.
I don't know, Kirk, if I would see I'm seeing the protesters' response on a deeper level.
Okay.
But what it is that what I'm seeing more clearly is that there is this kind of moment, this kind of situation that I can have many experiences of. This moment of witnessing an injustice perpetrated on the innocent.
Okay.
And I can be more aware of that. And being able to name that, not only am I naming what's happened in Raleigh in North Carolina, but I'm also have this stand-in for that. This bookmark that says this is a Goya moment. This is a May 8th, 1808 moment.
Okay.
I'm going to keep calling it May 8th.
It's all right. So if you type in May 8th painting, it'll come up. So that's right. That's what I did. So it's fine.
So
thank goodness for Google.
So in a similar way, you can find these moments. Why did I say that somewhere? I don't know. You can find these moments in art right now. And the course that I'm doing is looking at these 6 different artists and how they would find coronavirus moments in their art, in their lives. So Jacques-Louis David, he's noticing the isolation here. And he's noticing a particular kind of isolation, but that kind of situation is one that we can relate to. That Goya painting that you shared is a different facet of something completely going on. He's talking about Napoleon's troops invading Spain and executing people. But it's a kind of moment that I can then reflect on and say, you know what? That's true. That's like that Goya painting.
Yeah.
And I think, Kirk, this leads me to that second thing.
Okay.
That I said.
Sweet.
What?
I was hoping we didn't lose that.
Yeah, no. Oh, we're definitely not. The second reason to get to the artists themselves. And the second thing is, and I think can I do this by a quick experiment with you?
Let's do it. Let's find out what happens.
So I want to show you 4 artworks, and we just give them quick names, and many of them you'll recognize.
Okay.
I just want to show these 4 artworks, and just give them a quick title. As you see them, just give a name to them.
Okay, let me hold on one second. I'm going to pop over to. I've seen this one, and
what are you seeing now?
Power.
Great.
So, I know this. This is the poet. This is Tragedy.
All right, great.
I know that one. I'm so bad at this.
I think you've got 2 things going on in your mind.
Because I know these. I know all of these.
You know these, and you're trying to recapture that versus just responding to what you're seeing.
Yeah, I can't think of the word. Like I'm thinking, it's like excitement, like a lot going on, though, is what I mean.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great.
And then I'm thinking of grandness.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So these 4 artworks that I'm showing are all by Jacques-Louis David.
Okay.
You've got Napoleon, who's grandly striding a horse. I like that word. You've got Socrates amidst a tumult or amidst like this excitement going on around him. You've got this tragedy, and you've got these soldiers gathered together in what seems like power. And that's the word you used.
Now, was that poet Chatterton?
No. It's not. It's he's actually a French revolutionary named Marat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it says it right there on the thing.
Yeah, very helpful. Okay. Very helpful.
Yeah, I was thinking of Chatterton because there's a painting of him in a similar pose, and now this one he kills himself in this painting. Is that right?
Actually, he was murdered.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I got that way off. Well, okay. I'll go back to what you were going to. Sorry, I have seen all of these. That's why my mind was like exploding for a second. I'm so bad at these.
No,
I'm not quick-witted at all.
It's great. No, it's great. And I think that's good that you've seen these before, because I think what you can see is some commonalities between all these, not just in the style, but maybe in the type of story. The Grand Napoleon, the Grand Socrates, this tragic martyr, these heroes about to go off to war. There's this one thing I like to think of. Okay, if you had to describe this group of works, the group of works of Jacques-Louis David, what adjectives would you use?
Definitely epic.
Epic. Okay. Yeah. They're strong figures. They're going through drama.
Yeah.
And so what you can gain, and I think it's pretty clearly seeable in all artists, you have a kind of spirit of that artist. Mm-hmm. Not just the types of stories that they're drawn to, but the kinds of characters that they have, and the kinds of moments. Are they tragic? Are they grand? Are they everyday? Mm-hmm. Are they lighthearted? Whatever it is. And so the second great value, I think, that comes from examining the artist and bonding with the artist is knowing how he imbues his spirit into that moment. Mm-hmm. So if we go back and we take a look, right now you're seeing the 2 sisters. This is a very quiet scene.
Yeah.
These are 2 sisters, and they've received a letter. But what's that first word you used to describe that stare?
Bold. Yeah.
She's strong. There's this kind of inner strength that you could have seen in the Socrates painting or in the Oath of Horatii. And so what you have here is a certain kind of response to this, I'll call it coronavirus moment of isolation. Mm. It's not, as you pointed out, they're not wailing and crying, and they're not moping down in depression. There's this resoluteness that she especially has in the face of this. And that resoluteness makes you think, you know what? Jacques-Louis David, with his spirit, I can see him responding to this quarantine isolation with that kind of strength. And that's what he's projecting there.
Have you ever heard of the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so the reason I'm thinking about this is he has this whole perspective on what he calls a cabinet of advisors. And mm-hmm. It's an imaginary cabinet of advisors. But when you're faced with a decision, whether difficult or just to, take this career, marry this woman, move over here, these types of, or even just an everyday decision sometimes, he says that he goes to his cabinet of advisors, and his cabinet of advisors are people that he responds to and respects by knowing a little bit about them. And he has an image from them and he puts them on like a board or something. And that's what I did. And he kind of looks at them and asks, what would you do, Thomas Jefferson, right? What would you do, Abraham Lincoln? What would you do, Jacques-Louis David? And so when you were talking about that, that's what it made me kind of think about, is like, you have their spirit imbued in this one, maybe that self-portrait you had of Jacques-Louis. Is it David? Is that how you're supposed to pronounce it, or just David?
David, okay. David.
Because yeah. I've heard it pronounced so many different ways. Mm-hmm. So you have that, and you, of course, should have his artwork as well. But if you think about it, even from how would he approach coronavirus, knowing his spirit, right? Like I know a lot of people who have a bust of Ayn Rand or something, right? And they want to think about how would she react at a time right, like this, or how would this person react? And maybe that's not the, you don't want to live off that too much, but you can, that's what it made me think about anyway, when you were talking about like bonding with the artist and all their, compiling a chunk of their artwork gives you that ability to kind of look at them and ask like, what would this person respond, or how would this person respond in this situation, in another situation we're going to have in the future, right? Other situations.
Absolutely. I'm going to check out that book, Napoleon Hill.
Yeah, thinking
right.
Yeah, it's the first big self-help book in America. It like kind of launched the whole movement.
Because that idea of a cabinet of advisors is exactly the type of thing that I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
it's like that typical devil and angel on your shoulders type of thing.
100%.
But having it with a nuance of a variety of different perspectives and approaches to life.
Yeah,
and I think individual artists can give you that.
Yeah,
and you can ask the question, okay, so what does Jacques Louis David think about love? What would be his perspective on love? And then go find an artwork on that and see if that fits into that, your understanding of that spirit. You get to know somebody so profoundly when you see what kind of art they like, but even more so when you see what kind of art that they spend their life creating.
Yeah, definitely. It's a window into their soul for sure.
It's a unique kind of window into their soul.
Yeah.
Because their career, their life is about producing a window to their soul.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading, I've told people that I'm going through the Prelude by Wordsworth, and that's his autobiography. But it's all poetic, and it's probably one of the greatest works of romantic poetry ever. And it's, a lot of people don't read it, but it's exactly, what you're saying. It's he spent his entire life tinkering with it, literally, and he didn't publish it until after he died, right? And it's, so it's this mega poem, this epic poem, and reading it is just such an insight into the way his mind works, how he is, and of course, knowing the corpus of his other work really adds to that as well. And now, I don't think you do either. And I know we have to wrap up, so we'll start, I want to talk a little bit more and close up with your, this course that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Most people aren't able to, spend the time that I may be able to spend with Wordsworth, really investigating his life and reading the Prelude and all because it takes a lot of I would tell you that the Prelude is the hardest thing I've ever read in my life. Right. And I've read ancient Greek things. I've read, medieval, I've read a lot of different texts, Dante, and this is by far the hardest for me to read. And I would not expect a normal or a person who doesn't, an engineer who's busy working, building great things to spend hours troggling through this, not to make it negative, like this very dense and intense work. But there's still the value that I think you're bringing with your course of getting insights that you can take away from each of these artists because you've done that work, and then you're going to help people go through that process in a more efficient manner.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're talking about, okay, in order to know what the spirit of the artist, you got to have a good idea of what it is that they've done over the course of their life, and it takes a lot of time to do that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the particular benefits with the visual arts is that you can see it a little bit more instantaneously.
Yes.
We just did it in 4 artworks.
Yeah.
They're selected. I picked them out. It's characteristic of David, but you got a good feel for this is what he's about.
Yeah.
And those 4 artworks, and I can see how his projections of strength and that is imbued in a more domestic, quieter scene in the character of that older sister.
Yes.
So you don't have to go through and read all the preludes of Wordsworth and try to figure all that out in order to get to the point at which you say, I have a good feel for what the soul of this artist is.
Yeah.
Now, Kirk, to kind of give a little bit of a comparison, I think there's an artist that a lot of people are are very familiar with Norman Rockwell, and he's actually going to be the one that I'm going to start the course with.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of Norman Rockwell, you probably don't think of having to be strong in the face of great odds or executions and so forth. You think maybe of kids doing silly things.
Okay, yeah. I do think of the men for some reason that he draws, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah. But it's more the simple joys of everyday life.
Okay, yes.
That he conveys, and that kind of cleverness that he has. And so that became a fascinating question for me is, all right, so how would Norman Rockwell handle the coronavirus situation?
Okay.
So it meant, okay, let's look and see if there are any kinds of situations that he experienced in his life that were similar. Absolutely. And one of the big was World War II.
Did you say one or two? You broke
and
it. One, right?
World War II. World War II. Yeah. He was there for World War I as well, but the one that I'm going to focus on because he did so much art related to World War II is World War II.
Okay.
And that fundamentally changed the economy. Americans were dying. The world was in peril on an axis. So what does Norman Rockwell do? What does he pay attention to in his art?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm researching and looking at. And would you like to see an artwork of his that was done at this?
You don't have to ask, my friend. Just show me some art. Always.
All right. Okay.
Love it.
So, yeah, let me share with you my screen.
All right.
And you should see a blank screen, and here it is.
There it is. Yeah, so it's for some reason it's the father's faces that or the men's faces that he draws that are very interesting. But this whole scene is very wow. Yeah, it's really good. So do you want me to describe it or
Yeah, describe 2 minutes.
Okay. So I see a father standing with a newspaper in his hand as his wife, the mother of two young children, is tucking them in, and they're very, they're probably under 6, 7 years old. It can't be over 7 years old, in my mind. And then it's very interestingly positioned. If you think of it like a camera, because I think you can see the two kids are on a single bed together, so they don't have separate beds like you or I might have grown up with. And in the back, you can see the paint, the wallpaper. It's lit, and it feels like the parents are about to get downstairs and talk about serious stuff. I see a doll on the ground, and I'm interested in what is on that newspaper, right? Like I can't see it, but okay, I thought it would be something big. So bombings, something, horror. Yeah, so those are the two words I see. I couldn't see that before, so thank you for zooming in. That I think is the big one, right? Like I knew there was something on that because they are sheltering their kids and from the difficulties of the world, and they're trying to protect them from the difficulties of the world and putting them in this quaint, perfect little environment, which I think is one of the most difficult things a parent can do, particularly in a time of war, right? Like how do you protect a kid from knowing what's going on in a time of, and not worrying about that in a time of war?
So, Kirk, that's a very clear reading, not only of what's going on in the artwork, but also of the kind of moment that's being depicted. And you know what, Kirk? I'm not going to say anything else about this artwork because it's going to be one that's going to be featured in that first class.
Okay.
So if you want to find out how to personally connect to this artwork, and then how Norman Rockwell connects to this artwork, and more about Norman Rockwell, and what would he be like if he were your quarantine partner, and what would he be painting if he were here today, then I hope you'll join the course.
Before you go, can you explain the schedule to people real quick? So the live class meets once a week. How is this working? How do people get started? How do they go to it? close up with that, please, because I know you got to go in a couple
Absolutely.
minutes.
So it's a 7-week course over 8 weeks.
Okay.
7 weeks over 8 weeks. So there's 1 week, there's a break, and then there are private tutorial sessions that are built into that 1 week. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But during those 7 weeks, we're going to focus on 6 different artists. And the last week will be a multitude of other artists. And each class will feature one artist, and we'll spend time. So the first week will be one artist. Now there are 3 different sessions per week. So you'd sign up for just one session. And the sessions are Sunday night, or Tuesday in the day, or Thursday. They're separate sessions. So you sign up for just one of these sessions, because I'm hoping to have lots and lots of students, but we want to keep the classes small too, maximum of 14 per class. That invites more discussion.
Okay.
And so you sign up for the time that suits you best. And if you have to miss a class, for example, there are recordings of these, and you can catch them on the recordings. I am also going to offer each week, each class as an individually paid option. So if you say, you know what, I don't care about all these other artists, I just want Goya.
Okay.
Then you'll pay $30 to just attend that Goya class.
Okay.
So they'll be individually packaged, or there's the whole thing, which of course is substantially less than $30 per class. And the tutorial session, there's an option to have a tutorial session. And what I've done with my art appreciation classes, now art history classes, is to give the opportunity to students to develop their own presentation, to find an artwork and artist that they personally connect to, and to share that with others. And that tutorial session is like a private one-on-one art history, art appreciation course get together, a little bit like what we've been doing, Kirk. And then setting you up, if you want to give a presentation on the final day of class.
Okay.
So that's it.
So who is this for before you go?
It's directed towards adults.
Okay, adults.
It's directed towards adults, but I think teenagers can enjoy it too.
Okay, so high school kids up to any level adult.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So yeah, there is no prerequisite for this course. You don't have to have read my book, Touching the Art. You don't have to have participated in the class. You don't have to know who Norman Rockwell is.
Okay.
At the same time, if you are an art history expert, or you've gone to all these museums, or you know everything about David, Jacques-Louis David, or Goya, or anybody, that's okay, because we're going to approach the art in a little bit different way, probably than if you're not familiar with Touching the Art, than you've ever experienced before. So that's my sales pitch.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Luc, for your time and for sharing all the these great paintings and discussion about them, and teaching me about style and choice, which I probably should have known already. And thank you for putting on this course. And everybody go check out the course. Go to touchingtheart.com, and I'll put links to all this stuff in the show notes. And thank you very much for your time, Luc.
Kirk, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I love hearing how you take the ideas and you grasp and understand them. And that board of advisors, that cabinet of advisors, I'm going to check that out, because I think that captures a lot of what I think unknowing great artists can do for you.
All right. I like it. All right.
Bye,
take
Kirk.
care, everybody.